I hope no one gets distracted by today's look. I feel like a bad bitch, but if anyone should feel like it's hard for them to focus based on how I do my makeup, here's a picture of a more natural looking girl. Alrighty. Hello everybody, my name is Kitty Mary, and today I am going to react and respond to some of you guys' eco dilemmas. I thought this could be really fun, kind of like a Q&A, but not focused on me, but more like focused on you. So I asked you guys on Instagram if you had any eco dilemmas that you would like for me to respond and react to, sort of bring my take to the table, and if there was anything you needed a second perspective on, etc. I got a lot of requests to talk about different issues, and we're going to do so. Obviously, I've sort of tried to boil some of the questions down so they fit into the same category and whatnot, but I am also thinking we will need to make a little series out of this, which could be pretty fun, you know, sort of like a Ask Kitty Mary, and then it's not what's my favorite color like, because who gives a damn, but more in terms of like, what am I supposed to do here? Help! Like, I have no one to talk to. Then you guys, you know, you've always got me to talk to, which is sort of just where I want to go with this. But let's get into the dilemmas, shall we? Buying fast fashion brands secondhand, will this enable people to shop more new fast fashion? So yes and no. So I actually made a video about this a couple of years ago. 3-4-ish years ago, where I talk about how the notion of shopping secondhand, but primarily from other consumers, so via secondhand apps, and especially so if you're buying from sellers that sell secondhand fast fashion brands, well, then there is a chance that your money that you're spending on this secondhand clothes will go towards them and their shopping in the future. However, even though that might be true, and you know, there are other ways, like if you go to a thrift store, like a charity shop, and you buy an H&M t-shirt, that won't enable other consumers to buy it, because then the money goes to a bigger organization and not towards anyone's individual shopping habits. Anyway, I think we need to be really aware of how much we take responsibility for other people's actions. It's very easy as someone who cares about the environment to end up feeling responsible for other people's actions. And that can be a huge problem. It can lead to activism numbness or burnout. So even though there might be some truth to this, buying secondhand fast fashion is still tons better than going out and buying new fast fashion, obviously. There's also the notion that you can look for brands that are not fast fashion, or you can look for vintage brands, eco brands, etc. But a lot of the things that are in circulation in terms of secondhand fashion is produced the fast fashion way, and that might be really hard to avoid completely together in your wardrobe. But my overall take on this is that yes, actually it can help fuel other people's shopping addictions, but I would be really careful with how much responsibility you feel like is on your shoulders when it comes to other people's shopping habits. It's really not your responsibility at all. Thinking in these lanes might be detrimental to your overall sustainability practice. Wanting to live sustainably but do not have access to bulk shops. This has been an ongoing issue for me for years. It was only, I think this year, or like a year and a half ago, that my town, Aalborg, got their own bulk shop. Prior to that, I would go to other cities. For instance, if I was in Aarhus or Copenhagen, I would just always just have a couple of bags with me and then just stop by on my way back home. So I wouldn't go specifically to other cities to shop, but whenever I was there anyway, and I do travel a lot with my work, I would just go bulk shopping. However, that's not necessarily a very viable solution for everybody. Just, you could go out of town, it's fine, it's not gonna affect the carbon footprint of the food. No, it's fine. What I tend to do instead is that I look for packaging that has the least amount of impact. So a lot of dried goods, for instance, come in cardboard or paper, and that's tons better than plastic. It has a higher recycling rate. You can also upcycle it at home and use it for other different projects, etc. In terms of oils, I think this was mentioned specifically in one of the questions dilemmas as well, that they can't find oil in bulk. I don't have access to oil in bulk either. And also, I don't think it's that necessary. At least for me, where I live, I have the option to buy oil in glass bottles all the time, and glass is easily recyclable here. So that's sort of the solution I've gotten to. You can also get a lot of oil bottles that can be upcycled in your home, used for different decor and storage opportunities. But if you don't have access to a bulk store, that doesn't mean that you can't live sustainably or that you can't be zero waste. That's not what this is about at all. Plenty of things you can look for in normal supermarkets. I think I have like 3 or 4 videos where I try to shop zero waste, or like specifically plastic free, in normal conventional supermarkets. I'll leave them down below if you want to check them out. But just let it be known that bulk shopping is a very, very small part of sustainable living. It's a very tiny and often very privileged part of sustainable living. And there are so many other things that you can do as well that are much more impactful, or that are much more easily accessible, I guess. So I would look into some of those things as well. And of course, I have made tons of videos with lists with these actions. You can look at them. I will leave 1,000 links down below in this video, I guess, I think. I'm afraid to share the reasons behind my lifestyle change to my parents because they would probably discredit it. So this breaks my heart, but I think about half of all the dilemmas I got from you guys were related to how other people perceive you and how other people discredit, criticize, scrutinize, and ridicule you for choosing sustainable options or for trying to live a more sustainable life. This absolutely breaks my heart. I am so sorry that you have to deal with this bullshit. It's mind-baffling to me, honestly, that some people would ridicule or criticize someone for trying to be more sustainable. And not just like, the minimum you can do is just go, oh, that's not really my thing, but like, cool. And then that would be it. It baffles me that some people go out of their way to use more energy to discredit people. I think that's what we call a defense mechanism, honestly. But I'm just so sorry that so many of you guys have to deal with that, because it's just, it makes it so much more difficult to stick with sustainable actions and living sustainably in general if everyone isn't not even actively supportive, but just actively working against you. I don't understand why some people will go out of their way to do that. I just don't understand, and I'm sorry. But I think the most important thing here is to be honest and open in your communication about this. Not only in terms of, I want to do this now because this is more sustainable. Like, I want to be plant-based, I want to avoid plastic because it's more sustainable. But also talking about like the more mental aspect of this, like, this brings me joy, this makes me happy. Would you perhaps respect that this is something that makes me happy? I don't care if you agree or not. This brings me joy and makes my life easier to live. That it's fine if they don't want to do it themselves, but could they please let you do your thing? And this can be a very scary conversation to have with somebody, especially so, I guess, if you're not used to setting very clear boundaries with friends and specifically family. That can be really, really tough if you're not used to sitting down and speaking clearly, communicating clearly. Some people will see that as a criticism of them. Some people will see that as you setting boundaries, as you demanding too much, but you don't. You're not demanding too much by setting boundaries that are healthy for you. Okay, a little lighter dilemma that I think we could just, like to sort of like a palate cleanser, but this is something that I really like. Using water to rinse out recyclables. This made my day a little bit, but I have also seen a lot of people talk about this and a lot of people question if that then makes the recycling, because you have to use water to rinse it, makes it more unsustainable than to produce new plastic. Specifically, I think the question here specifically mentioned plastic, but definitely all types of recyclables. There's a lot of steps in any supply chain that we as consumers don't see. So a lot of people won't necessarily notice or know that producing new materials require a lot of water, because every production basically requires water some way or another in the supply chain. The amount of water we use to rinse out a piece of recyclable material, packaging, etc. is tiny. It's a tiny fraction of the amount of water it would have taken to produce new plastic instead. There's also the notion that not every piece of packaging that goes to recycling needs to be squeaky clean. Like, you don't need to overdo it. Simply just washing out the worst small leftovers of food is just completely fine. Some facilities don't even require you to rinse them out, and if they do require you to rinse them out, you can also use dishwater once you're done with your dishes. There are other ways of going about it to save water, but I would hate for you to think about rinsing out recyclables as a big water consumption, as a big waste of water. It really isn't. Producing new material over and over again, is a big waste of water. Then there were tons of you who submitted dilemmas about flying and airplane travel, specifically because some of you have to travel with plane to go see your family because you live abroad or they live abroad. And I understand why this is a dilemma, because the impact of airplane travel is atrocious. I think the impact of airplane travel accounts for about 10% of global emissions, between 6 and 10. Cars account for about 6%. So airplane travel, of course, is up there in terms of emissions. Actually, the internet has a higher carbon footprint than traveling by plane. Fun fact, by the way. And I wouldn't sit here and recommend anybody to never see their family again because they live in a place where you have to travel by plane to go. That would be wild. If you have to travel by plane, sometimes you also have a job where that is required. There can be all kinds of reasons why you have to sometimes step foot on a plane. And even though traveling by plane and the amount of consumers that are responsible for the majority of the emissions when it comes to airplane travel is a tiny, tiny part of the global population, less than 1%, I think. It's a very, very small part of the human population who use airplane travel to the extent that it is the reason why it is so polluting. Okay, so if I was in that position and my family lived in a place where I had to travel by plane, I would travel by plane to go and see them occasionally. Of course I would. Anything else would be, and then I would carbon offset the heck out of that trip, obviously. If you do want to know more about carbon offsetting, have an impact video about that, and you know how to find like the good carbon offsetters in contrast to the completely irrelevant carbon offsetters. No one is perfect when it comes to sustainability, and sometimes there's something that you have to do that you don't really have control over. Then I would advise you to look at the things that you do have control over and try to reduce the impact of those things as much as possible. There's also the notion that sometimes it's actually more sustainable to travel by plane than, for instance, to take a ferry for several days, because traveling by boat actually also often comes with a higher impact because there are fewer passengers and there's a bigger machine that has to go from A to B. I'm at a point personally right now where I haven't traveled by plane in ages, but I also, when I started to go no-fly and use other types of transportation, I also said to myself, don't say things like you're never ever getting on a plane again, because then if you suddenly have to, that's gonna feel like a failure for you. That's gonna feel like you did something wrong and like that you failed sustainability, and that's a really non-constructive way of thinking about sustainable actions. So instead say something like, I'm not going to travel by plane unless it's necessary, unless there are no other option, etc, etc. So for instance, choosing my vacation spot, I will choose something that's closer by or something that is reachable by trains or bus. I have the privilege of having my family literally an hour away, and I know it is far from every family that has that privilege. And of course you should go and see your family every once in a while. And then again, focus on the things that you can control and that you can change. I think that's completely okay. Maintaining this idea that there's something you just have to do if you want to live a sustainable life, or if you want to pursue sustainability, and you can't join the club if you have to fly a couple of times. I feel like that's just very counterproductive towards the whole movement. So that's sort of where I'm at this point. If it's unnecessary, if there are other options, of course, look into those options. But if there aren't, well, that's not really your fault now, is it? Going back to a great one, a cute one even, is what do you do if you have too many jars? I love the practicality of this one. This is great. But honestly also a kind of fair question, because I keep talking about how you can upcycle and reuse different containers in your house, and at one point you're not gonna have house, you're just gonna have jars for walls. What I usually do is that I can find space for many jars, many places, and I do have a lot of jars. I don't have too many because I use them constantly. They're all in rotation in one way or another. But if I have to transport food to my parents' house, to friends, etc., if I have to wrap gifts or like small treats, etc., any kind of food storage option where I have to transport the food out of my home, I will also use jars, and specifically jars I don't like that much anymore. And then they will get the jar and they can reuse them. If you have a bulk store nearby, usually a lot of bulk stores also have like a free jar section where people who forgot their bags can use a free jar instead. And if I have too many jars, I will also leave some there for other people to use. So those are kind of like the ways I try to keep the jar population in my home down a little bit, and it does seem to help. So these were the dilemmas. I hope that you liked this video. If you did, you can leave this video a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed already, what are you waiting for? Please subscribe to my channel. That would make my day. And also turn on the notifications so you will get notified next time I post a video. I will do more of these videos, I think, because I got a lot of dilemmas, and I will keep doing them if you want to see more as well. So if you have a dilemma, leave it down below or send me a DM on Instagram and I'll include it in my next video. Perhaps. That depends on how many DMs I get. Thank you so much. Have an amazing day and take really good care of yourselves. Until next time. Bye. Thank you so much for watching this video, and also a special thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys help me create green, zero-waste content, and I love you guys. You can find the links to my social media accounts down below and the link to my Patreon on this screen. Bye!